In the shadowed ridges and deep valleys of East Tennessee, a quiet rebellion brewed, not against the Union, but against the Confederacy. It was 1861 and the United States was fracturing. While much of the South surged with talk of independence and states' rights, the people of East Tennessee held firm to a different vision, one rooted in unity and a rejection of slavery's expansion. This region, rugged and mountainous, was unlike the plantation-heavy counties to the west. Its residents were small farmers, craftsmen, and laborers. Few owned slaves, and fewer still felt bound to the cause of secession. When Tennessee held a referendum on whether to leave the Union in June of 1861, East Tennessee made its feelings known, a resounding 20,000-vote majority against secession. They were not a people easily swayed by political trends. They were, instead, deeply loyal to the Union, stubbornly, almost defiantly so. Prominent leaders emerged from this region, voices that would echo through the war and beyond. Andrew Johnson, the Greenville tailor who would become president, lived in a modest home with a sign that simply read, A. Johnson, Tailor. Horace Maynard, a Knoxville attorney and congressman, stood as another voice of Unionist resistance. And then there was Parson Brownlow, William G. Brownlow, the sharp-tongued editor of the Knoxville Whig, who used his pulpit and press to scorch Confederates with language far removed from any Sunday sermon. But as the war unfolded, East Tennessee found itself isolated. Confederate forces occupied the region, and the promised protection from the Union Army never arrived. The people waited, believing Washington would not abandon them, but the silence grew deafening. Men like General Samuel P. Carter, himself an East Tennessean, organized brigades of loyalists across the Kentucky border, training and planning for an eventual return to liberate their homes. Letters poured into President Lincoln's office and to Union commanders. They spoke of desperation, families torn apart, men hiding in caves, loyal citizens arrested and shot as traitors. "Our people are pursued as beasts of the forest," wrote Johnson and Maynard to General Don Carlos Buell, pleading for action. President Lincoln was deeply moved. He wrote to Buell repeatedly, urging a march into East Tennessee, not just for strategic reasons, but for moral ones. "I think we owe it to our Union friends in Eastern Tennessee to protect them at all hazards," he said. He said that McClellan, in command of all Union forces at the time, echoed the sentiment, calling it a movement dictated by the simple feelings of humanity. Yet the help never came. General Buell, cautious and calculating, offered only excuses. Supplying a force through the rough terrain, he claimed, would require thousands of wagons and tens of thousands of men. He dismissed proposals to advance with smaller forces as simply ridiculous. In Washington, the frustration boiled. Lincoln, despairing over yet another delayed campaign plan, telegraphed Buell, "My distress is that our friends in East Tennessee are being hanged and driven to despair. In this, we lose the most valuable stake we have in the South." The Confederacy, meanwhile, took notice of East Tennessee's unrest. Confederate officials like Governor Isham G. Harris and General Zollicoffer warned Richmond that civil war within Tennessee was imminent. Leaders such as Thomas A.R. Nelson and William P. Carter were seen as ringleaders of a Unionist insurrection. The Knoxville area in particular became a pressure point, with Colonel Wood reporting to Jefferson Davis that the people were on the brink of uprising. By November 1861, when Confederate elections were held, most East Tennesseans refused to vote. Some had fled across the Kentucky border, joining Carter's camp. Others remained in hiding, surviving on little more than hope. Still others were captured and imprisoned, including Judge David T. Patterson, Andrew Johnson's son-in-law. The Confederates believed they could crush the rebellion in the East with 12,000 to 14,000 men. No shots would be needed, they claimed, just firm action. But they underestimated the resilience of mountain loyalty. Even as 1862 began, with Union armies making gains elsewhere, East Tennessee remained trapped. Soldiers from the region serving in Union ranks at Loudon, Kentucky, were sick, hungry, homesick, and still barred from returning home to fight for their families. Horace Maynard, writing to General George H. Thomas, admitted his shame at the failed promises he had made to them. "My heart bleeds. The poor fellows have had a bitter experience since they left their homes to save a government which, as yet, has hardly given them a word of kindly recognition." The tragedy of East Tennessee wasn't just in its suffering, it was in how preventable that suffering was. As one Confederate observer put it, Union men in the region awaited federal troops with as much confidence as the Jew looked for the coming of the Messiah. Their belief in the Union never faltered, even as the Union itself failed them. In hindsight, the strategic opportunity was immense. A successful campaign through East Tennessee could have severed the Confederacy's east-west rail lines, destabilized Southern control of North Carolina and Georgia, and delivered a blow to rebel morale. It could have shortened the war, but through a tangle of delay, bureaucracy, and overly cautious leadership, the chance passed. Years later, it was said that a single division of Sherman's 1865 Army would have marched through East Tennessee like it was a picnic. But in 1861, no such force came, and so the people of East Tennessee bore the cost, isolated, hunted, and loyal to the end.